For months, Democrats tried to get Republicans here in the Senate to make a few simple policy changes to make sure that ICE and CBP were wearing body cameras, were wearing identification so you can know who they are. We're not wearing masks. We're driving vehicles that were marked, and we're accountable in officer use of force instances. My colleague Susan Collins from Maine said that in voting for the $70 billion that was given by Republicans to ICE, she got a commitment for the wearing of body cameras and for use of force incident policies. That doesn't seem to have happened. And these two more recent tragedies of the 4 killings that have happened in broad daylight on our streets are things that Republicans must be accountable for fixing. This is just wrong. And for me in particular, seeing that account, hearing the account of Sebastian's widow, and young child, 3-year-old, wailing by the side of the car after he had been shot point blank is just heartbreaking. And all of us need to step up and do a better job of holding to account those who we give the power of life and death in law enforcement, recognizing that we want safe communities, but we can achieve them in an appropriate and just way by having policies and procedures just like every other state and local law enforcement agency in our country. Why should ICE be given billions of dollars, lack of training, lack of supervision and oversight, and not be held accountable? This is a fundamental challenge to civil liberties and to justice in our nation.
Yeah, well, that's a good question for Susan Collins to answer. Jonathan Lemire, the president's just wrong. Americans are against what ICE is doing. It's very interesting. You look at polls, 2/3 of Americans think more police officers in their communities make them safer. I agree with them. 2/3 of Americans, about the same amount, disagree vehemently with ICE tactics, with what ICE is doing. Over 50% of Americans think that ICE should either be completely defunded or have their funding slashed. So if you're a Republican and you're running for re-election and you're seeing Americans being gunned down in the streets, or you're seeing fathers, workers who have been here for over 30 years being gunned down in the streets, you're seeing these stops that would have an NYPD officer fired and probably arrested, pushed by this administration. If you're a Republican seeing the president doubling and tripling down on these heartless killings, you're very worried right now. You're very worried because you know that the overwhelming majority of Americans disagree with the president. The overwhelming majority of Americans want police to keep their communities safe, but want ICE out. They want the killings to stop in the streets of America. They love their police. They want police to keep their communities safe. And at the same time, they want ICE out. And this president's just doubling and tripling down on the cold-blooded killing of fathers, of parents, of husbands, of workers.
He's doing it right now.
And he's doing it right now. I mean, so if you're a Republican and you know how unpopular it is, when are you going to start pushing back and telling the president, no, we can't let these thugs continue killing people in the streets of America?
We kept talking in months past about when that moment might come. Like there was suggestion maybe after the Republican primaries or after filing deadlines. We kept looking for these markers that, hey, that maybe when this date comes and a Republican candidate realizes that he or she doesn't need as much support from Trump, they have more freedom to disagree with him, maybe he or she would. That's, with very few exceptions, still not happening. It's still not happening, despite Trump being on the wrong side of seemingly most issues, despite his poll numbers being completely in the tank, despite him doubling and tripling down on these toxic issues. And let's remember, Joe and Mika, his original promise was that this deportation program was going to focus on the worst of the worst. Not only has that not happened, but but it's how they're enforcing this, including doubling down on the traffic stops today from the president the day after ICE said they were going to back off of it, and also who they're using to conduct these ICE operations, who they're using to conduct these stops, including reporting from The Atlantic this morning that the shooter in the Maine shooting was a new recruit, someone who perhaps didn't have the proper ICE training. This was not someone who had done this kind of work before, and that's why we're seeing these moments of violence and why so many people fear there'll be more to come.
And it's so important that you mentioned that Susan Collins, voted for more money for ICE for body cams. And that was back in April, I believe, that vote. So they had time to get body cameras in there. But even more, if they didn't, they had a lot of money back in April. They already had a lot of money. There is no excuse for body cams to not be on the bodies of these very untrained ICE officers.
Well, let's take
don't want evidence.
Let's take Susan Collins at her own word.
Thank you, Susan Collins.
Susan Collins says that she voted to give them $70 billion for body cams and investigations. All right.
Where are they?
Where's the investigation? The body cam wasn't there. So where's the investigation, Susan? You said there was going to be an investigation. They're shooting people in the streets of your state,
Maine.
In Biddeford.
Hard-working, beautiful town.
Where is the investigation that you promised Mainers?
It's all connected to...
Where's the investigation? Let's see it. Or will there be a cover-up like there was in Minneapolis when Alex Preddy was gunned down in what looked like an execution-style killing? Or when Renee Good was gunned down, shot 3 times from the side of her car. Where those investigations never came. Will there be an investigation in Houston? Will there be an investigation in your home state? You said there was going to be. I hope you're not lying to your voters. Let's see that investigation start now. And if you trust people in your own state, then let Maine cops, let Maine investigators, let Maine prosecutors do the work, and let Maine judges, along with Maine jury members, render the verdict. Susan, if what you mean is what you said, this is very simple. Start the investigation today.
Yeah. We're also learning new details about President Trump's primetime speech set for tomorrow night. 2 administration officials told MS Now the address will focus on voting machine security and alleged foreign efforts to influence U.S.
Oh, good. We're finally
elections.
going to talk about Russia in 2016.
There's also,
I'm glad they're finally doing that.
No, there's also been speculation President Trump may declare the state of Georgia, 2020 election results illegitimate.
Is that where he asked the Republican Secretary of State to find him 11,000 plus votes so he could win?
That's the state.
That's the one. So he's going back to that?
In fact, here's what Democratic Senator John Ossoff...
I'd stay away from that if I were him.
Who won by a narrow margin in the state's
because the Georgia Secretary of State has him on tape saying, rig this election for me.
Yeah. Well,
just find me the 11,000 plus votes.
I remember that. I think we all heard it.
Is he going back to... He wants us to talk about that? Why does he want us to talk about that?
Here's what Ossoff told reporters yesterday about Trump's baseless claims of voter fraud.
Very confused indeed.
The President of the United States tried to commit voter fraud in Georgia when he badgered Brad Raffensperger to, quote, find him the exact number of votes he needed to win in a state he had lost in 2020. He is reheating debunked conspiracy theories and launching bizarre new lies because he fears losing these midterm elections.
What do you say to your Republican colleagues who may agree with the president on this?
I don't know of Republican colleagues who agree with the president on this. Privately, most elected Republicans in this building think the president has lost it and is dooming them to dismal losses this fall.
Senator Coons, does that line up with what you're hearing from your Republican colleagues? And what do you make of this idea that President Trump, in a primetime address to the nation tomorrow night, will go back to the 2020 election to explore all these debunked claims that he says to introduce new information, which sounds like he's going back to one of these conspiracies about the Chinese government getting into voting machines, all this stuff we litigated 6 years ago, and that this administration and that Donald Trump lost before more than 60 judges across the country, dredging that up again. What do you make of it?
What I hear from Delawareans is they'd like to hear President Trump explain the tens of billions of dollars we're spending on a war in Iran. They'd like to hear some path forward on how costs come down, the cost of housing and health care, gas and groceries. And nobody asks me to relitigate the 2020 election. I think this is President Trump trying to veer sharply off of what is on the minds of voters. And Republicans in the Senate are despondent. The few I've talked to about this, about how the president isn't focused on the things he needs to focus on, leading our country forward, rather than driving the car looking in the rearview mirror. President Trump is filled with and fueled by grievance. And part of the Todd Blanche hearings today for Attorney General will be about how President Trump has required him, urged him, goaded him into relitigating and going after folks like Jim Comey from years ago, rather than using the Department of Justice to make Americans safer. It is possible for us to be safe and to have police who conduct themselves in an appropriate way. And to go back to the previous point we were discussing, several of us in the Democratic caucus in the Senate have co-sponsored a bill to take some of those tens of billions of dollars that have been given to ICE and transfer them to state and local law enforcement, who overwhelmingly do a good job of keeping Americans safe, and take that money away from a lawless agency that has untrained new recruits and is killing people in the streets. President Trump should address that crisis. How will he keep the American people safe in a way that's just, rather than relitigating conspiracy theories that have already been trotted out in court after court after court and failed?